Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So this evening, I'll just read through the agenda, follow through the agenda for jobs tonight. To start off with announcements. In accordance with Resolution 2/2012, you're informed that Scott Steelson is derived live streaming tonight's meeting. Okay, we now move to consent agenda. A motion to approve the entire consent agenda. Do I hear a motion? I think Lady.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Department reports. All right. So let's start with Kristen.
The Honeybrook Community Partnership met yesterday, and plans are in full swing for the Honeybrook Community Harmony Day. Details will be coming in August as to where to purchase discounted wristbands for the fair, which will be September 11 to 14. And the health fair will be on 21st, which is the third Saturday in September, the traditional Harmony Day. I wanted to point out that the Honeybrook Food Pantry will be having two special services offered at their distribution on July 24th. There will be somebody offering free vision screenings to children aged 6 months to 11 years. And there will also be Closet of Grace on hand to have folks shop their racks for clothing. So that whether or not that's the normal day that one picks up from there, folks are welcome to come on that day for those things. This is something new I saw in the Philadelphia Inquirer. There is a service out of East Stroudsburg University where if you are bitten by a tick and you are concerned about what that tick might be carrying in terms of disease, you can actually send it off to East Stroudsburg University for analysis. And you can have a basic panel for free, or if you want a more detailed one, you can pay a fee. But if you go to ticklab.org, you can find out all the information for that. And lastly, a programming note. On Friday, August 9th, the administration office will be closing at 2:15 p.m.
Okay.
That's all.
Thanks. Steve, Don?
Good evening.
Anything for roads?
Yes, we're got our seal coating project done for this year, and we're now doing some patching on the roads, and we still have some more ditching also that we got to catch up on and do yet. We're going to probably get started within the next few weeks, maybe on Park Road project as soon as we get our number. And we finally got our boom mower, and so now we're kind of playing catch up on trying to get around. Get some things moving back. That's about it.
So your damage mark is pretty good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Steve?
Yes, just a few things about it on this evening's agenda. This item number 5, we have a motion to direct or not direct Technicon to move forward with the Supplee sidewalk project. We had been waiting to see how Technicon put together a couple of options after the survey was completed. They did that, and the board elected to go with the less expensive option. And we feel confident that this will come under the bid amount, and the bid amount being $20,600. So if you give Technicon the okay, they'll put together a little spec to direct the construction. We'll get 3 competitive proposals and move forward with the loan proposal. The next item, number 6, we have here requesting that I be obtained to obtain price quotes and award a contract to replace the 3 heat pump units for this building. Here again, provided it's less than $20,600. If it's more, we'll have to put together a bid package and then report back to the board. The nice, balmy weather that we feel in here is because the heat pump units, the 3 units that maintain temperature for the lobby, bathrooms, and this room have all decided to go at the same time, which we find highly unusual. So I have asked our insurance company to check into it in the event this is an event that we can get any insurance back on. But barring that, we'll need to do that and use some of the monies from reserve in the capital reserve fund. And the next item is motion to direct me to submit 2 applications to PennDOT. One is for Park Road, the other is for Morgantown Road, and Don just briefly touched on those, and request her to use liquid fuels funding for those 2 projects. And the projects had been put in the budget for this year, and materials and largely the contracted services are all under co-stars or have been bid. So we'll provide the information to PennDOT. If they give us the okay, we're just saying, let us move forward. That's all I have. Thanks.
All right. Any updates for land preservation? All right, Parks and Recreation.
I have no update. We did not receive minutes from their last meeting, and they will not be meeting this month.
Okay. And on the planning commission, Mike.
Planning for this month, I believe there's a couple members here tonight as well. We will be looking at a submission for a revised subdivision plan, as a minor plan coming in. We also have a revised plan for the pump station on Brook Road. So that's coming in for land development review and for land requests. And finally, I believe we also received a variance application that the commission will be taking a look at as well. That's all I had, unless the Bob or
What you said, right?
Okay. Oh, Terry's not here tonight. That's what I was saying. I don't have to say. All right. I was looking at that. I thought you said that. But that's all I have.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, at this point, we have a presentation, and I'd like to, we have the Fair District's PA. So, and welcome, and welcome back. And my excuse me, sorry, talking to you last time.
Thank you. I'm going to move this microphone over here
Yes.
so I can handle this. I really try.
While check this out, we'd like to do introductions. Okay.
Sure. So my name is Kathy Dale. I'm a volunteer with Fair Districts, Pennsylvania, and I serve as resolution coordinator for Chester County. I live down in New York Township on the southern part of the county. And Carol is our speaker, Carol Cunningham, who is our founder of Fair Districts, Pennsylvania, and she's a resident of, I think it's Euclid Township.
I apologize, I'm not a PC user, I'm a Mac user.
I'm not
Uh, And we saw this presentation at the COG meeting, so looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah. Ah, it's gonna work.
It's working, okay.
I am able to talk about this, but it's a very visual topic, so it's much more interesting if I can show you what I'm talking about. In 1991, Ronald Reagan, as he was leaving the presidency, said, gerrymandering, the practice of rigging the boundaries of districts, is the greatest single blot on the integrity of our nation's electoral system. He was talking about congressional districts, but it's also done to state legislative districts. He said gerrymandered districts are grotesque, misshapen symbols of political chicanery, and he said states should set up bipartisan citizens commissions to draw district lines. That was his 1991, and here we are almost 3 decades later, and it's a far worse problem now than it was then. I want to talk a little bit about that and about what we would like to do and what we are here to ask this august body to do for us. So as you heard, I'm chair of Fair Districts PA. We are a group that was formed in January 2016 by the League of Women Voters and some other good government groups around the state who have been advocating to end gerrymandering, to put a better redistricting process in place since as early as 1991. So as long as that quote has been out there, some of these folks in this group have been working on this. And what I'm here to do is to explain what gerrymandering is, and I know I need to be brief, but I want to explain what the current process is, explain why this matters to a town like Honeybrook, and to ask for a municipal resolution in support of an independent redistricting commission. So this is a little bit of a very short civics lesson, which starts with some vocabulary. Reapportionment is when, after the census, every 10 years, there's a national census. You've probably been hearing a lot about that. The next census will start April 1st, 2020. And at the end of the census, all that information is given to Congress, and they redistribute congressional seats. There are 435 congressional seats that are divided across the states. They never add the seats. So when population moves, population changes, population shifts, they redistribute those seats across the states. Pennsylvania, for the last several decades, has been losing a seat each 10 years, and we're pretty well guaranteed to lose a seat again. It's not that we're shrinking, it's that other states are growing faster. So we will definitely lose one seat. We'll go from 18 congressional seats to 17 in 2021. And as a result of that, what happens next is redistricting. If we go from 18 districts to 17, those lines have to be redrawn, and that's redistricting. So our congressional districts are redrawn as a simple bill. Legislature's given a bill, they vote on it, it goes to the governor, he signs it. That's the new map for the next 10 years. The state legislative districts are drawn differently. They're drawn by 5 people, and this is built into the state constitution. 5 people, 4 of them are majority or minority leaders in the legislature itself, or people that they choose who are also in the legislature itself. And then those 4 choose a 5th person. If they can't, then the state Supreme Court chooses the 5th person. And those 5 people go in a back room somewhere and they draw the district lines for themselves and for their colleagues. And that brings us to this word, gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is the manipulation of district maps for partisan or for personal reasons. And in Pennsylvania, it's very personal. Legislators draw their own very safe districts, and they're known to draw people off the map that have not done what they've asked them to do. So if a legislator does not vote the way his leader tells him to, he will just be drawn off the map. And I can show you districts that were once there and ended up over here because that person did not do what they were told to do. And both party leaders in both parties do this. They use the districting process to maintain tight control over their colleagues, and to keep the people they want in office, and to make sure the people they don't want in office are no longer in that district. The earliest use of the word was in 1812. Governor Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts signed off on a district map that looked like that weird salamander, and the press put his name with the word salamander and came up with the word gerrymander. So now you know where that word comes from, 1812, Elbridge Gerry. It's a conflict of interest. It's as if you were able to write your own job description, do your own job review, and give yourself a raise whenever you wanted to. And that's basically how our state legislature works. And no other major democracy anywhere allows legislators to draw their own district lines. Pennsylvania's 7th congressional district was often cited as one of the country's worst. And it was given funny names. Goofy Kicking Donald is one. If you look, you can kind of see the Goofy Kicking Donald. How many of you were in Congressional District 7? How many were in Congressional District 6? So 7 wrapped around 6, 6 wrapped around 7. And if you look at this, you can see that how things changed over time. People say, oh, well, the districts have always been gerrymandered, right? Well, no. Over time, as mapping technology has improved and as data mining abilities have increased, it's been more and more possible for legislators to simply draw districts that put the people they want in the district where they want them, and to control the outcomes of the elections by strange, very strange district maps. So District 7, 6, and 16, those 3 districts through this whole area were kind of woven in and around each other. Look at 16, the way it goes through Lancaster and then all the way up to Reading and last to Reading. This whole area, heading east, would be a very competitive area if it was drawn well, and you would see people, legislators, having to appeal to everybody to actually win votes rather than be told that vote, that district was drawn for them. And I have talked to people who said, oh, well, we did have to finagle that district a little for that particular legislator. As a voter, I find that incredibly offensive, no matter what party the person is. If you're finagling districts for legislators, what you're doing is shutting voters out and diminishing our voice. Coatesville School District was divided between 3 congressional districts. There's no reason for that. They don't even know who their congressman is. Owen J. Roberts and Downingtown were split between 2. There's huge implications for communities when they're divided up that way. So that map, I misspelled that. Pennsylvania was heavily gerrymandered, no matter how you measure it. It used to say Pennsylvania is, but now the word is was. And by various measures of gerrymandering, as of 2016, Pennsylvania was the worst in the country. So the efficiency gap was used in a federal lawsuit, measured wasted votes. By that measure, Pennsylvania was the worst. Seats to vote, that's one that I find really interesting. If you have 50% of the seats go to each party, you would assume that 50% of the votes go to each party, you would assume 50% of the seats should go to each party. What we had in Pennsylvania was about 50% of the votes going to Republicans and about 50% going to Democrats, and yet Republicans were getting 13 out of 18 seats and Democrats 5 out of 18. So that's the seat to vote skew. That was the worst in the country, again. And then there's some other measures by those we were also in the worst 5. So mathematically, I would say we were the worst, which ended up in a lawsuit. If you remember, there was a lawsuit in 2016, 2017. In 2017, the map was redrawn. So this was the original congressional map, and you can see some really strange stuff going on there, like Erie, which historically was 1 congressional district with 1 congressman who was part of the Great Lakes Alliance, or coalition. It was divided into 2, one of them which went almost halfway across the state, and one of them more than halfway down the state, almost to Pittsburgh. That was what happened to Erie. Erie just lost its voice completely. And the Lehigh Valley was another place that was deeply impacted. Historically, it was part of 1 congressional district, and instead it was divided into several. In our area, that's what our map looked like. The new map that the court-appointed master drew is that one there. And this area, suddenly, Chester County is in 1 congressional district, as it should be. Montgomery County, instead of being divided into 5 congressional districts, now is in 1 congressional district with a little bit of an extra because the population demands a little bit more. So that created much more competitive elections. It created more interest in the elections. It brought people back to voting who had kind of given up and said, if it's already decided before I ever get there, why do I even go? But lawsuits are divisive, they're confusing, they're expensive, people get angry. They can go on for a long time. North Carolina, believe it or not, has been in litigation on its district maps since 2010. And that just ended when the Supreme Court said, I know you've been having lawsuits for the last 8 years. Tough luck, guys. Live with the maps you got now. So lawsuits are not ideal, and also they're only a partial and temporary remedy, if at all. So although we have new congressional districts, those will only be in use in 2020, then they'll be redrawn in 2021. But our state map, I would argue, is of even more importance to us here in Pennsylvania. And it is among the most gerrymandered in the country. By various measures, we fail in terms of fairness, along with about 6 other states. And if you look at that vote-to-seat skew, which I mentioned, we have the worst vote-to-seat skew of any state in the country back in 2018. Chester County, that's our senatorial districts. We really ought to have 2 and a little bit more. Instead, we've got pieces of 4. Downingtown and Coatesville school districts are divided between 2 senatorial districts. There's really no reason they should be divided in that way. But House districts are even worse in Chester County. Downingtown school district is divided between 5 House districts. There are places where there's 1 representative for a particular House district. Downingtown has 5. And it's the worst in the state, except for Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, which of course have multiple House districts because they're so large. Downtown is not that large, and yet it has 5 House districts, which shows how much energy was put into drawing these district maps to control outcomes in an area that would otherwise be fairly competitive between the parties. I worked a polling place in Phoenixville a couple of years ago, and people were really puzzled because there were 2 different ballots. And so they came in and it was like, oh no, that's not your ballot, this is your ballot. And the poll workers were having a hard time figuring out, how do we make sure that the right people get the right ballot? Everybody was perplexed. If you looked at the district map, you could see what happened. That particular precinct was actually divided into 2 separate House districts. By our Constitution, our state Constitution says the district should be drawn compactly, contiguously, and with as few divisions of boundaries as possible. Instead, they're drawn in strange ways simply to control the outcomes. Now that has implications far beyond just maps and far beyond just elections. Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, a good friend of our organization, a Republican from Bucks County, was the head of the Public Corruption Unit in the FBI before he became a congressman. So he prosecuted corruption in political situations. He said invariably the people who got involved in corruption had safe districts, gerrymandered districts, where they believed they were above the law. They could not be voted out by their voters. They felt entitled to their districts. They considered themselves kings rather than representatives. And I believe you can see that when you look at some of the districts here in Pennsylvania. Another one of our good friends, Representative Gene DiGirolamo, a Republican from Bucks County, says compromise is not a bad word when it comes to democracy. But when you have gerrymandered districts, the only election is going to be in the primary, and that's all you're going to care about. And you're not going to be delivering solutions that work for everybody, and you're not going to be thinking about compromise. Because when you're only worried about somebody running against you in the primary, you are not likely to want to compromise with the other side. And in my 25 years, I'll tell you, when Democrats and Republicans are willing to work together and compromise, you get much better legislation for all 12 million people who live in this great state of Pennsylvania. And in reality, if you look at what's happening in Harrisburg, there's very little compromise going on and very little being accomplished on behalf of the great people of this great state. And I could go on at some length about the policy implications for municipalities like Honeybrook. And I'll just whip through these quickly. There's a paper, a finding called Communities in Crisis that was done by the Pennsylvania Economy League. It talks about the many regulations and policies that govern what happens in the municipality. 10 years ago, they did a paper that suggested 2,000 changes in Pennsylvania law that would lighten the burden on municipalities and make the economy function better. How many of those do you think were enacted? I don't know of any. Another one is school funding inequity. We have the most inequitable school funding in the country, and puts a huge burden on property tax. We have one of the lowest state contributions to school funding in the country. And what that does is it forces property owners, aging property owners, to carry the burden because the state refuses to do that. It's a huge problem, and it creates a huge inequity in our schools. And there are good solutions. Many states have come up with really good ways to solve this. Pennsylvania simply ignores it. Another one, I don't know if you know this, but there are 18 cities in Pennsylvania that have higher levels of lead exposure than Flint, Michigan. And we don't really know how many towns in Pennsylvania have worse lead exposure because there's no requirement to test, there's no requirement to share the information, there's no requirement to remediate. Most states where this is a problem have put requirements in place and actually have found funding to fix this so that children are not at risk of lead poisoning. This is a problem across our state because we've got older buildings, older housing, and it's a problem in our state legislature. 20 years, I had an intern count bills that have been introduced in Harrisburg to address this. 25 bills introduced over 20 years. The only bills that have made it out of committee are bills to say, let's have a lead awareness day. That's it. Lead awareness days, but nothing to require testing, nothing to require reporting, nothing to require remediation or to help fund remediation. I could go on. This is
What does the percentage number mean?
the percentage number mean?
Yeah, what, 23% of what?
So there's a lead number exposure, and yeah.
23% higher than the lead found in Flint, Michigan,
You're comparing us to
Flint.
Okay.
Yeah.
which has been notoriously.
All right.
Yeah. And let me just make another point about that. In Flint, it was in the water. In Pennsylvania, it's not in the water, it's in the air. So in Flint, once parents knew that this was a problem, they could go buy bottled water and know that they were protecting their children. In Pennsylvania, you don't have that option. Your children have to breathe. And there is no way to buy bottled air. So what we propose is an independent citizens commission, a commission made up of people who are not invested in drawing lines to keep themselves in power, district lines that would make legislators actually have to run rather than, no, I've been given this district, and as long as I do what the leaders say, I'll be here for the rest of my career. That's a huge problem that we have, and there are many legislators who have their own handcrafted districts, and they're perfectly safe as long as they do what the leadership tells them to, on both sides. And what we're suggesting is we would have a more functional democracy, a more functional legislature, and we would get more done and have a stronger economy if we had district lines so that people actually had to run for the office rather than know they were there for good forever, as long as they did what they were told. So we're proposing an independent citizens commission, 4 from each major party, 3 independent or unaffiliated. There would be 3 pools of applicants, and then they would be randomly chosen, not selected by legislators, so they put their best friends in. They couldn't be lobbyists, they couldn't be elected officials, or people who had been past elected officials. And then that group would have to represent the state. It'd have to be people from across the state, from across the parties, obviously because of the pools, but demographically diverse. And then they would have to have a public process where they would invite input from people to say, well, these towns all belong together, or here's a hard edge, like some places if you look at some of our districts, they go across the Susquehanna River in places where there is no bridge. Or District 7 actually crossed the Schuylkill River and a bunch of railroads in a place where there was no way to get there, and you had to go around through several other districts to get back to District 7. That makes no sense. So the public ought to be able to say, I had a man call me up who's a Republican from, I think it was Westmoreland County. He called me up and said, I found you on the website, and this whole thing just makes me so angry. There's a mountain between me and my House District office, and it takes me 45 minutes to drive around the mountain to get to his office, and whoever drew that map had no idea what Pennsylvania actually looks like and doesn't care about us at all. And I think that is the case. So these districts will be drawn with public input. They would not allow use of partisan information, so you couldn't carve it up to make sure that your person won. They'd have public hearings about the maps after they were drawn, so people could say, no, that's not going to work for us there. And every map would have to be approved by at least one person from each group. So it'd have to have 7 votes, but at least one of those votes would have to come from each of those groups. So one party couldn't just ram something through. I could go into more detail about it, but I don't have time. What I will say, though, is we've had 21 counties and over 280 municipalities who have passed resolutions in support of this. Many of them unanimously from all across the state. You can kind of see where we've had them passed. Where we have, I think, 150 more out there that are in process. And more recently, they've been passed unanimously. People like you look at this and they say, yeah, we would like a legislature that actually worked for us. The Pennsylvania State Association of Boroughs passed a resolution in support just last month. And we now have more than 68% of the state population covered by resolutions. So my request to you is consider the resolution. I believe you've been given a copy, or Kathy will give you a copy. We'd love you to pass it, and we'd love for the Western Chester County powers to pass it.
The board does have a sample copy of the resolution.
Thanks.
Thank you, I wasn't sure.
Is that on anyone like?
What I can say about our presentation is, if you look, fairdistrictspa.com is our website. We also have, if you go to fairdistrictspa.com and look at the bottom, you'll see a little link to our YouTube channel. We have some presentations on our YouTube channel that are much more detailed, much more information. We're also going to be, I will be speaking at Telhi on September 24th at 1 o'clock. And I'll be giving a much more detailed discussion of this. This is my very, very short, quick version, which is hard for me to do. I'll be speaking at Telhi on September 24th at 1 o'clock, and that will be a longer presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay. All right, at this point, open forum on my right. Anyone on this side of the room? Yes, sir.
Yes, I have been indirectly influenced by what's going on with these new developments. We're only allotting 2 parking places per dwelling. What happens when a child turns of age to drive? Where's that child to park? If you're an elderly couple, where does your children park when they come to visit you? I run into it because my son's in one of those situations. He's got a 19-year-old son. He has to pay $100 a month for an extra parking spot so his son has a place to park. You go to visit, you're going to park on the street. Then the next thing you know, the police comes along and tickets you for illegal parking. We're letting these developers put new developments in, allocating 2 parking spots per dwelling. It's not enough in our modern day.
You make a good point. And, that's, you see, we're looking at some of these developments for additional parking space. That one of the items we cover with developers.
Oh, well, that's something that's in our code.
Yeah, the zoning ordinance requires 2, a minimum of 2.
Yeah.
We obviously don't have a maximum, but I'm not sure what the specifics of this gentleman's concern is, but every development usually goes through a traffic impact study, which requires a look at parking and parking needs and those types of things. So that's really all I can say about it. I don't know, again, what the specifics of this gentleman.
Well, we just had a development down here on 322 come in. He's proposing to take a present lot and expand it for more trailers, but he's only proposing 2 parking spots per trailer.
Well, we haven't reviewed that plan, sir. The plan hasn't already been there, so we haven't even reviewed it yet. We can't continue to comment on that.
All right. I believe that developer is excluding guest parking.
Yes.
Guest parking.
Yeah.
Slot.
Excuse me, sir, can we have your name for the record?
Clarence Whitfield.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Do we have any other comments from this side of the room? Okay. On this side of the room. Yes, please.
Forgive me for reading it, but I've never spoken at a meeting before, and I'm just a little nervous,
Go right ahead.
okay?
Would you like the microphone?
Thank you for your time. Good meeting. Okay, my name is Jeannie Sarmento. My husband Peter and I opened American Stone and Landscape Supply in 1994. In 2000, we moved into our home at 3040 Horseshoe Pike. We felt good about owning these two properties, which were zoned mixed-use commercial in a township that offered nothing but growth and promise. Unfortunately, 10 years ago, Peter's business partner fell in lust and moved to Colorado. That, combined with the struggling economy, left us with no choice but to sell the business property. We were lucky to break even with the sale to Earth Care. That left us with only our home on 1+ acres to lay our hopes of one day selling as a valued commercial lot to assist us with our retirement goals. It has come to our attention that recently our property has been rezoned R10 residential. This puts us in a position of undue hardship by limiting how we can sell our property and greatly reduces any profit we may have made from the sale had we made commercial. With the front of our property being road frontage on 322, Turkey Hill on one side, and a notary and auto repair business across the street, we are better positioned to be a commercial lot. Rezoning us back to a commercial lot would also benefit and enhance the township by one day bringing new business and revenue to the area. It is for these reasons that I implore you to please consider us for rezoning to mixed-use commercial. And I'd also appreciate any help as a group and as individuals if you can give me any direction as to who I might need to go to next, or if there's other meetings. I know that on the website there was a zoning meeting listed for the 22nd, but there was something about things had to be submitted in advance, and I don't know if that would be me because I'm not applying to use my property differently. I would just like it to go back to its original zoning.
Right, the zoning hearing board meeting, like you just talked about, has nothing to do with this issue.
Okay.
Those are all very specific matters, like
Right.
variance requests.
We're putting a business on our property.
Yeah, so this is the body that you need to address. The Board of Supervisors, listen to these types of requests, and certainly then would direct staff to do whatever investigation they want. Eventually it would go, if changes are recommended, it would go to the planning commission and back to the board for a vote. So you're talking to the right people.
Okay.
Incidentally, the R10 designation is not a township designation, that's a county assessment designation. So your zoning isn't actually R10, your assessment is R10.
Okay.
What that means is you are using your property for residential purposes under 10 acres. But that's all that means. That is not your actual zoning per the township, just so you know.
Your zoning is mixed-use residential. So
And-
you're correct, it's residential.
And on older maps, if you really blow them up, you can see our little piece of property as commercial.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it definitely was. It was, your property was commercial prior to September of last year. That's correct. And as she mentioned, her property is next to the Turkey Hill. Right?
Yeah, she's right across the street from my business.
Right.
So it really would serve us better and possibly down the road the township better if it could go back to a commercial zoning. It would not limit how it would be sold or to whom it would be sold. Heck, I thought Sheets was going to come buy us out someday, but that just never happened.
Explain to her what mixed-use residential means.
Well, she's aware of it. I talked to her on the phone.
Oh, okay, all right.
I've talked to Mrs. Sargent, and explained, how we went from where we were with the 20-some mixed-use commercial down to 9, that we're talking about this evening.
Would it help to leave a copy of my request with anyone to keep it in the
Sure.
file?
No, that'd be great. Thank you very much. No, I can make copies.
Anyone that's signed, right?
Yeah, I can make copies. Of course, this is fine. And if you're ever wondering, if anything is going on or what's going on, just give me a call.
Thank you, I appreciate your
Sure.
help.
Question?
The ordinance has been advertised with certain properties having their zoning classification changed. That's the zoning map ordinance. We would need to re-advertise and go through all the notification process again to change that. So if the board is sympathetic to the presentation that has been made by Mrs. Sorrento, we can start another ordinance process to accomplish that goal. However, if the board tonight decides that the properties that are already on the list, you do wish to have the zoning classification change, I would recommend you go forward with that, because all of the effort that's already been put into place, all the expenses that have been incurred, would be essentially wasted, and we'd be starting from scratch again. So the most efficient way to do this, in my opinion, would be to go forward with the ordinance that's already been advertised, if that ordinance is satisfactory to the board. And then, again, if you're sympathetic to Mrs. Sorrento's request, then to direct the staff to prepare a second zoning map change to accomplish that outcome.
And maybe even perhaps if we're going to do that, we can take a look at other parcels like Mrs. Sorrento's that we had taken out of this particular proposal, and see if any of those should be put back in.
Yeah, because if you simply postpone the action tonight and add this, all the preparation for tonight will have gone by the wayside, been wasted, and it would delay the zoning change for those that are already in the advertised ordinance. So, in my opinion, it would be most appropriate to consider the ordinance that we already have on the table, but then to start a new process for additional properties, if that's what the board wishes to do.
The question, when we're looking at these properties, changing the zoning, what's the notification to those property owners?
The process with the zoning map change, we need to review it with the Township Planning Commission, we need to review it with the County Planning Commission, we need to review it with the Planning Borough. And after we get all of that feedback, then the board decides that the ordinance is satisfactory to be advertised. Then we publish notice in the newspaper, we mail notice to the people whose individual properties are being affected by the zoning change, and we post those same properties with a notice of the ordinance. So all of that is the process that's necessary each time there's a zoning action.
It's an item we can make shortly.
Excuse me, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Please, we had never received anything in the mail, and we do have security cameras in our properties.
So you were, well, that was a comprehensive rezone. There are different legal standards.
I believe you're within the
Or-
law, but it's
Yeah.
morally wrong.
Well, for what happened in 2018, that was the result of a process that actually unfolded over a period of years with a new joint comprehensive plan, including the township and the borough, and then following the adoption by both communities of that joint comprehensive plan, there were zoning revisions that were considered again for a period of years based on the outcome of that joint comprehensive planning process. So it was really probably, 4 years or more?
Yes.
That was the process that resulted in the September 2018 changes. And because of the comprehensive nature of those changes, it was not legally necessary to send specific personal notice to individual residents. But I understand your point that, there was a change that apparently you were not aware of. What I'm I'm speaking about in terms of mail notice and posted notice, that applies where there's a zoning map change that is not based on a comprehensive rezoning project. And the ordinance that's under consideration tonight is not comprehensive. It is very specific to, in this case, I guess, nine specific properties, which obviously is a whole lot less than most of the township. So, if the board would go forward with a change to your particular property, you would be getting mail notice and posting.
All right, this time, let's turn it over to a public hearing. We have a question, yes.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
I'm not familiar with the order of proceeding, but I wanted to ask, I know the zoning ordinance amendment is coming up.
Yes.
Is this the proper time to get a comment on that? Well, actually, we're just about to open a formal public hearing. Mrs. Sarmento's comments were accepted as part of what we call the open forum, which is a general public comment period. Obviously, we're already talking about the ordinance, but I would recommend to the board, if your comments are about the zoning ordinance, okay, why don't we open the public hearing and then ask the gentleman to provide his comments at that time?
So, let's go ahead. So we'll open the public hearing and turn it over to Chris Hartman, the township solicitor. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. This is the time and place that's been advertised for consideration of two ordinances. One amending the zoning map of the township, the other one amending various substantive regulations in the zoning ordinance. We're going to take each of those two topics separately and have a separate public, separate public hearing as a formality on each of those ordinances because they are two separate legal documents. What I would want to say first about, and let's do the zoning map change ordinance first. Again, this was a process where subsequent to the enactment of the comprehensive zoning amendment in 2018, the Board of Supervisors became aware that there were certain properties that were changed to a residential designation of mixed-use residential that the board, upon further consideration, has determined would be more appropriately considered under mixed-use commercial, which is more similar to their prior designation under the pre-existing zoning ordinance. Well, on the basis of that discussion by the Board of Supervisors, an ordinance was prepared to accomplish that change. Originally, there were a number of other properties that were considered, but ultimately the ordinance that was advertised and notice provided included 9 properties. Those properties are all along Route 322. It's 2051, 2043, 2035, 2027, 3026, 3800, 3784, 3766, and lots 35, 60, 80, 88, 90, 94, and 100 of Village Square. The ordinance that has been prepared to amend the zoning map of the township to change from mixed-use residential to mixed-use commercial, those properties that I just listed, has gone through all of the legal process required under the Municipalities Planning Code of Pennsylvania, including review by the Township Planning Commission, review by the Chester County Planning Commission, review by the Borough of Honeybrook, and there was mail notice and posted notice provided to each of the individual properties that are listed, and further there was published notice in the Daily Local News on June 25, 2019 and July 2nd, 2019. So I would open up the floor at this time, Mr. Chairman, to any public comment from the audience tonight about the zoning map change. Does anyone have any public comment on the zoning map change? And we will certainly incorporate Mrs. Sarmento's handout as part of our record on this particular ordinance map. Does anyone else have any comments on the zoning map change? Okay, I don't see any indication. I'm guessing, sir, that you had comments on the second ordinance, the other ordinance, is that?
That's right.
Right, okay. With that being said, is there any questions from the board about the zoning map change ordinance that's under consideration tonight? I see no indication of that. So I would recommend to the board that at this time we close the public hearing on the zoning map change ordinance. Is the board agreeable to that?
Yes.
Okay. So now we can move to the second zoning ordinance amendment under consideration tonight, and that is an amendment to the text of the regulations that are contained in the zoning ordinance. And this amendment covers a variety of topics, among which are the following: revising definitions and regulations for wineries, distilleries, and breweries, commercial vehicle parking, permit administration, kennels, commercial establishments, sidewalks, lot, yard, and height requirements, outdoor storage and display areas, parking requirements for certain uses, interior access drives, accessory use setbacks, non-commercial antennas and towers, home occupations, open space design option, elder cottage housing opportunity dwellings, wetland margin, and steep slope and riparian corridors. Similar to the zoning map change that I described a few minutes ago, this ordinance is the result of reflection that the board has had since the enactment of the comprehensive zoning ordinance in September of 2018, where it has come to the township's attention that there were certain adjustments that would be appropriate to existing regulations, where it may be appropriate to add new regulations on topics that had not been considered in the comprehensive zoning ordinance, and otherwise to bring some additional regulations or changes in regulations into the zoning ordinance on all those various topics that I just listed. This ordinance, after considerable discussion by the Board of Supervisors and the Plan Commission, was finally put into a draft form that was submitted to the County Planning Commission. There were 2 reviews that were provided from the County Planning Commission, one in January and the second one in June, and the comments from the County Planning Commission were considered by the board, some of which were incorporated into further revisions to the draft ordinance. So again, as to the legal formalities that are necessary to bring this to consideration tonight, there was review by the Township Planning Commission, review by the County Planning Commission, and there was advertisement of the ordinance that occurred on June 25 and July 2nd in the Daily Local News. With regard to this ordinance, there was no legal requirement for mail notice to anyone or posting of notice because it was not a zoning map change in this second ordinance. So that's an overview. I mean, there's obviously many particular details on all those different regulations that I described, some of which, I think most of which, if not all of them, have been discussed here at prior meetings of the Board of Supervisors. At this time, I would recommend to the board that we turn to the audience and ask if anyone has any public comments on the second zoning ordinance that's under consideration tonight, amending substantive regulations of the township zoning ordinance. Now would be a time for you to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Nicholas Roscoe. I reside with my family at 15 Pine Tree Drive in Honeybrook Township. I'm here today to provide comment on those changes to the Code of Township, Chapter 27, Part 10, Section 27-1003, H1D, the supplemental use regulations for accessory uses, buildings, and structures pertaining to non-commercial antennas and towers. In addition to being a resident of Brook Township, I am also an active amateur radio operator. I'd like to thank the Zoning Commission, the Township Council, and supervisors, and the Township Solicitor for taking time to research and take input on this subject. Proposed changes clearly indicate that the authors of the ordinance have taken the initiative to become familiar with portions of Pennsylvania's general local government code that impact amateur radio communications. So for that, I thank you all. Amateur, more colloquially, boy, it helps to have a drink before you start. Ham radio is an activity many people are at least casually familiar with, be it through a relative, a friend, a neighbor. Most folks have come into contact at some point with a practitioner of the hobby. Unlike citizens band or family radio services, amateur radio operators are required to be licensed by the Federal Communications Commission. We use our own time to study the required material and take FCC license exams. A section of the Code of Federal Regulations is dedicated to the amateur radio service, specifically 47 Code of Federal Regulations, Section 97. As stated in the FCC regulations, the amateur radio service basis and purpose are given in the following principles. A recognition of the enhancement of the value of the amateur service to the public as a voluntary, non-commercial communication service, particularly with respect to providing emergency communications. B, continuation and extension of the amateur's proven ability to contribute to the advancement of radio art. C, encouragement and improvement of the amateur service through rules which provide for advancing skills in both the communication and technical phases of the art. D, expansion of the existing reservoir of amateur radio service trained operators, technicians, and electronics experts. And C, continuation and extension of the amateur's unique ability to enhance international goodwill. Unique among the various wireless radio services, a prime mandate of amateur radio is to support communities in times of emergencies. Amateur radio has demonstrated time and time again its utility during emergencies. During the recent Hurricane Harvey down in Texas and Hurricane Katrina, numerous examples exist from media accounts of how people and property were rescued through amateur radio communications. When all other forms of commercial communications fail, amateur radio gets through. On September 19, 1985, the FCC issued Memorandum and Order PRB-1 concerning federal preemption of state and local regulations pertaining to amateur radio facilities. The PRB-1 Memorandum and Order has subsequently been incorporated into the Code of Federal Regulations. In pertinent part, PRB-1 as codified states, except as otherwise provided, a station antenna structure may be erected at heights and dimensions sufficient to accommodate amateur service communications. State and local regulation of the station antenna structure must not preclude amateur service communications. Rather, it must reasonably accommodate such communications and must constitute the minimum practical regulation to accomplish the state or local authorities' legitimate purpose. In 1999, the FCC amplified the restrictions on the powers of the municipality when it issued a further order holding that the very least regulation necessary for the welfare of the community must be the aim of its regulations so that regulations will not impinge on the needs of amateur operators to engage in amateur communications. As held by a federal district court in the subcase, Snow versus Missouri City, Texas, in the Southern District of Texas, 2003, PRB-1 requires a site-specific, antenna-specific, array-specific, operation-specific analysis. text under the PRB1 mandate is, I should say, the text under the PRB1 mandate is not what would satisfy one, some, or even most radio amateurs, but rather whether or not the municipality will reasonably accommodate a proposed installation to allow the amateur to conduct the communications he or she desires to engage in. As I'm sure you are aware, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has incorporated the requirements of the PRB1 order into the General Local Government Code, Section 302, with the passage of Act 88 by the Pennsylvania General Assembly in 2008, stating a municipality that adopts an ordinance, regulation, or plan, or takes any other action involving placement, screening, or height of antennas or antenna support structures shall reasonably accommodate amateur radio service communications and shall impose only the minimum regulations necessary to accomplish the legitimate purpose of the municipality. The Pennsylvania law also took the additional step of specifying a height below which amateur radio facilities cannot be restricted. No ordinance, regulation, plan, or any other action shall restrict amateur radio antenna height to less than 65 feet above ground level. Taking PRB1 and the Pennsylvania General Code Section 302 together, it is clear that both the Commonwealth and the federal government require that any ordinance related to amateur radio antenna structures must reasonably accommodate the desired communications and must constitute the minimum practical regulation. In plain language, this means towers installed for the purpose of supporting amateur radio communications cannot be the subject of any unusual or unreasonable setbacks, unusual or unreasonable fees and costs, and arbitrary height limitations. When crafting these ordinances, with respect to towers for use in the amateur radio service, the township and the township solicitor must continually ask of each requirement, is this minimum practical regulation to meet the township's legitimate purpose? And does this accommodate the petitioner's need? The proposed ordinance as written does not meet the requirements of either PRB1 or the PA General Local Government Code. Specifically, the ordinance imposes a height limitation regardless of surrounding terrain conditions. Unrealistic setbacks and siting requirements, excessive weighting toward existing uses on surrounding lots, unnecessary engineering studies, and wholly inappropriate reference to concentration impacts due to facilities of excessive height. Finally, the ordinance does not differentiate between an antenna, which is used to radiate electromagnetic energy, and a tower, which is used to support the antenna, and attempts to impose a single antenna limitation. Given the wide range of frequencies the amateur radio service operates in, from 136 kilohertz, or maybe more colloquially, 0.136 megahertz, up to over 100 gigahertz, a single antenna is incapable of meeting the operational requirements. And I state that not only as an amateur radio operator, but also as a degree practicing electrical engineer. An acceptable ordinance might be worded as follows. The maximum height of any non-commercial tower shall be the maximum building height for principal structures in the applicable zoning district. Non-commercial tower shall not be located any closer than 75% of the height of the tower to any property line. Towers installed for use in the amateur radio service shall be exempt from these requirements. Designs for proposed tower installations for use in the amateur radio service shall be reviewed by the building inspector to ensure the proposed tower installation meets applicable state and federal safety and design standards. Again, This is not to say that amateur radio towers should not be regulated. It's rather to say that they should be regulated in accordance with federal and state requirements. So, thank you for your time. I have a copy of not only this statement, but I also have copies of the PRV1 requirement, the Pennsylvania General Code requirement, several law reviews investigating antenna heights, a study that provides information on antenna height and communication effectiveness, and also information on typical towers that are used for the amateur service and how these towers fall. In general, they do not fall in a straight line, rather they collapse upon themselves because of the yield strength of the metal in the acceleration due to the falling of the tower. So, thank you, and please present.
And we have a copy of your statement as well.
Yes.
Question? No. If I understood what you're saying, that our ordinance is making a restriction that's not consistent with the state and the federal requirement?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, is your tower in existence today?
It is not. And I became aware of the orders of this. Sorry, I'm running out of orders. I became aware of the orders when I approached the township asking to file for a building permit to put up the tower.
Okay, so, all right. So you would like to put up a tower, you don't presently have a tower.
That's correct.
And how tall is the tower that you would like to put up?
Well, the tower I'm looking to put up would be either 65 or 70 feet. Again, I do not perform the terrain study, but I can say where I'm located, that I have a large hill behind me that will render signals coming from the south to the antenna radio. I also have a large hill north, about a quarter mile, that will affect propagation from the north. So these would affect propagation primarily to the north over the North Pole.
Okay, so but your proposed tower would be 65 or 70 feet.
Yes, it would, well, that would be the structure. I guess
Okay.
the other point that I'm taking a significant exception to is what I believe is unintended confusion between an antenna.
Okay, well, let's clarify that. The tower, not the antenna, in your case, would be 65 or 70 feet.
Yes.
And how many feet above the top of the tower would your antenna extend?
The first antenna would likely be within a foot or two of the top of the tower. The next antenna, in order to minimize interaction between the first antenna and second antenna, would be approximately 6 to 8 feet above the first antenna.
And would you propose to have only 2 antenna on your tower?
In the initial installation, but again, one of the activities and one mandates from the SEC is experimentation. We're the only radio service that is allowed to modify our radios. Family radio and citizens band radio are not allowed to modify their radios. In a similar vein, we frequently will experiment with antennas to look at new radiating structures, to find better ways to radiate, more efficient radiators. And given that, I have to say that moving forward into the future, it is very likely that I would be changing antenna configurations, moving antennas around. So I cannot say that we're only using antennas on the tower.
Can you reasonably estimate what the maximum length of an antenna might be that you would anticipate the possibility of installing on the proposed out?
You mean horizontal length?
No, I'm trying to get the vertical.
Well, the vertical length, and I don't understand the question.
Okay, what I'm trying to understand is the total height that is, that you are considering as a reasonable possibility on your property. Total height of tower plus antenna, which you've already indicated would be probably at least 2 to start and possibly more over time.
So, the tower structure itself, the top of the tower will end at roughly 65 or 70 feet. Again, a round number is more common because the towers are sold in 10-foot sections. So it's much easier to get to 70 feet than it is to get to 65 feet, unless you do something that could be mechanically questionable. So, from that point, there would be a mast that went into the tower and interfaced with a rotator unit that would allow 360-degree rotation in the antennas. And that mast would extend above the top of the tower at least 8 feet. Probably a little longer, because typically, from a mechanical point of view, you don't want to put an antenna at the very end of the mast. You want to leave at least a foot or two of mast above the top of the antenna.
So I just want to just heard that the potential height would not be more than 80, potentially up to 100 would be maximum. I'm trying to get that range.
Well,
I'm trying to get the range there, yes.
I mean, I cannot sit,
Yes,
for my
yes.
personal, at this time, I cannot see going above 100 feet.
Okay.
For my personal, what I'm doing with the
Yeah.
park amateur rate.
Right.
And I also have the land that would meet the full 100% setback.
Okay.
Again, I provide a letter from the road corporation that explains typically how guide towers fall.
Mhm.
And typically they do not fall in a straight line fashion.
Yeah.
They crumble down on top of themselves. So it's perfectly reasonable to
Here's the 75%.
exact of tower height.
So at the location that you would contemplate on your property, and let me understand, you already are a property owner in the township?
Yes.
Correct, okay. At the location you would anticipate placing your tower, do you have any knowledge of what the distance is to the nearest property line?
Certainly over 100 feet.
Okay. All right.
So,
Based on what he has described, it sounds like what he is personally proposing would not meet the standards of the ordinance that is advertised for consideration tonight. As I read it, the proposed ordinance has a maximum height of non-commercial antennas and towers 65 feet, or the equivalent of the distance to the nearest property line, whichever is less. I don't see engineering studies though as part of this. What I thought I heard in your statement was a concern about doing engineering studies.
yes, that was in the statement.
There is,
At the end of the ordinance, it states, first it requires
The actual ordinance limits the height of any non-commercial antenna and tower to the maximum building height for the principal structures in the applicable zoning district. So in essence, the height is limited to whatever the height is for any other structure.
Well, that's, okay. That sentence that you just read is what we would say is by right, meaning that you don't need to go to the zoning hearing board for any hearing process if that's the height that you are using. But if you want to go higher than that, up to the 65 or equivalent of the distance to the nearest property line, whichever is less, in that case, there is a procedural obligation to go to the zoning hearing board and present some information to the zoning hearing board.
Right.
So,
Get the special.
so the way, right, so, you know, my interpretation of the ordinance is that the maximum building height for principal structures in the applicable zoning district is not the cap. The cap is 65 or the equivalent of the distance to the nearest property line, whichever is less. But there is an additional procedure required to get to that 65 feet.
Correct. Again, maybe I'm being pessimist in my reading of the ordinance.
Well, please explain. I mean, what I'm hearing already from you is that the fact that the ordinance treats antennas and towers in combination and not separately, that poses a problem for you on height because, you know, it looks like you're pretty close to compliance with the tower height, but when you add your antenna and the way the ordinance is worded, it appears that that height limit applies not only to the tower but also to the antenna, and that's a problem for you. So,
Yes. And also reading it the way it's written, if the tower were used as an antenna, it would also be limited. So I think, again, I'm maybe looking at fine lines here. Sorry, I work as a systems engineer.
I work with a lot of engineers. I know how engineers are.
I heard that.
So, every word has meaning.
Yeah, but sorry. The question is, I'm trying to understand what you presented to us from the state and federal. Is that saying to us that we don't have the right to regulate?
Well,
those heights?
see, I've been focusing on his situation, to understand what his needs are. In terms of the overall validity of the regulation that's been advertised, my opinion is that the township has a valid regulation. And the reason I would assert that the township has advertised a valid regulation is because I believe the township has the authority to consider the impact on the neighborhood of what you are seeking to do, and or what other people who would want to have non-commercial antennas and towers in the township would want to do. So what the ordinance is looking at is compatibility with the neighborhood. And as far as the height is concerned, I haven't personally looked at the regulations that he's described. But generally, I don't think we're far off the mark, although, you know, if I need to look at those regulations to more specifically understand the interplay of the 65 feet that the law says is the minimum that we can regulate, and whether or not that applies only to towers or also applies to antennas. So I don't have a complete answer for the question of whether we have a valid ordinance, but generally speaking, my opinion tonight is that we have a valid regulation that's been advertised for consideration by the board. But it doesn't meet Nick's particular needs apparently. So, it, you know, would be somewhat limiting for what Nick wants to do based on really what I think is the antenna extension above the tower. Or really, I guess it's the mast and the antennas antennas above the tower that are potentially transgressing the proposed neighborhood. So, with that having been said, I don't know what the board's reaction is. I mean, again, I believe that we have a generally valid regulation that's been advertised for consideration, but I believe that it may not meet Nick's specific requirements for what he wants to do on his property in the township. But what he wants to do, I don't think is crazy or excessive. If you have a large lot, you know.
1.6 acres.
1.6? Okay. And it would be at least 100 feet from the property line. And what kind of neighborhood are you in, do you know?
I mean, it's,
Residential development.
Resource conservation.
Yeah, resource to residential development.
It's a residential development. Okay. All right. I don't know what your neighbors are going to feel about your antenna. Have you had any conversations with your neighbors about your hobby?
I have, well, I've not had direct conversation regarding, hey, I'm thinking about putting up a tower, but as I mentioned, I'm an amateur radio operator. It's something I enjoy. I have an existing antenna on the site that works, but it does not fulfill the need that I'm trying to fill in maintaining these international contacts.
And you also have a commercial tower quarter of a mile from your home.
Yes, this is true. Which is much taller than anything I personally would ever dream of.
Do you think you have the ability to persuade your neighbors of the service that you can provide in terms of safety for the community and information and all that? I mean, you did a pretty good job of selling the fact that you have the potential to be a valuable resource in the community with your amateur radio activities. It would be helpful if you could tell that same story to your neighbors.
Sure. I mean, that's certainly something I would do in the process. I'm not a salesman. So, given that, I can only go so far.
Okay. Similar to our first round of public comment tonight, my recommendation to the board would be to adopt the ordinance as amended, as advertised, I should say, as advertised, because we've already put an awful lot of effort on a whole myriad list of topics, and people are looking for action on those topics. We have one topic, this radio, non-commercial radio, which may or may not be hung up with the current regulations. So I'm reserving judgment until I look at, the materials that you provided tonight as to how we would apply the ordinance as advertised to your situation. And I would further recommend to the township that if the board adopts the regulations that have been advertised, that you direct me to review the materials that Nick has provided, and that I give you some feedback as to whether or not what he wants to do is permitted under the advertised regulations or not. And if not, then what changes would be necessary in order to accommodate his particular needs, while at the same time keeping in mind that we have a responsibility to look out for the compatibility. Now, if you're in a residential development, you know that the predominant land use is residential. Your neighbors all feel that their number one investment in life, is their residence, and they go to work every day and work very hard to pay the mortgage on those homes, and they don't want any of the people who live in that neighborhood to negatively impact the value of their homes. So, that's what I think you're up against in terms of, compatibility, and that's where I think the board of supervisors needs to obligated to follow under federal and state law. And again, I need a more subtle understanding of that than I have tonight. So the bottom line is, I would recommend to the board that you go forward with the ordinance with the advertised regulations for non-commercial antennas and towers. Let us review the materials they provided and give you some feedback about how they would affect Nick, how these regulations in the draft ordinance would affect Nick's situation in light of the federal and state standards, and then we can talk further about whether or not any amendment of those standards is necessary or appropriate. And I would urge you to give the board the opportunity to go through that process as I described.
I would, again, in the spirit of cooperation, I am a member of the American Radio Relay League. It's the national organization, in fact, I'm a life member. It is the national organization for amateur radio. They have a program with volunteer counsel who are very versed in these legal matters with regard to tower structures for amateur radio. There is a local volunteer counsel if you wish, and happy to provide you his contact information. He can give you a much more comprehensive overview of the material than I am. And I should probably proper overview of the material rather than my happiness.
Well, again, if the board wishes me to have that discussion, I'd be more than willing to do so. I would do that after I review these materials, but I would be willing to talk to the council later.
May I ask a question? With a 60 or 80 foot or 100 foot tower, you would need stabilizing cables from the top to the ground, I'm thinking.
Well, in my particular proposed installation that I'm considering, I will be using Roman Corporation R25 tower, which is a guide tower. So yes, there will be guides. Rome, for the design that I'm considering, has approved stamped, engineer stamped designs that show that they meet the wind loading requirements. The guides will all be maintained within the distance to the property line. None will extend that far out.
Well, we'll look into that when you do the planning, when you bring it back and we'll look at it. We're gonna get through the meeting here. We'll have to do it tonight. So whenever you do planning, then the planning commission will go through that and decide what that is.
Very good.
Thank you.
Do we have to go to the hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we have any further comments?
I do, but not about towers.
Okay. In the rear?
I just have a question. So you mentioned a lot the importance of the neighbor's approval of this and like the value of the property. When you buy your own property, shouldn't you be able to do what you want on your property if it's not harming anyone else? Like what is if someone thinks that the color of my door is gonna make the neighborhood uglier, then should I not be able to paint my door that color? Like, I guess I don't really understand. If there's no HOA or anything restricting that, why think, the approval of other people in the neighborhood is important?
Well, it's not, the process I described is not for the neighbors to specifically approve the project, but there are a couple of different ways in which the impact on the neighbors is relevant. One is that the Board of Supervisors, when they enact zoning regulations, have a duty to take into consideration the impact of various uses in different locations in the township. One of the key concepts of zoning is to group together compatible uses and to separate incompatible uses. So that's why we have residential districts and industrial districts, so that we group together uses that really go together well, and we separate uses that we think are going to be likely to generate conflicts between them. So in a residentially zoned district, if someone brings a use onto their residential lot that the neighbors don't feel is really residential or is compatible with residential, the neighbors may very well be upset about that. And the Board of Supervisors have to anticipate those potential conflicts when they draft the regulations. So it's really the township supervisors, as residents of the township, knowing the community as well as they do, they have to anticipate how some things will go together well and some things won't go together well, and try to draft regulations that anticipate the reaction of the community. So we don't have a system where there is direct approval by the residents, but it's an indirect kind of process where people come to a meeting like this and tell the supervisors their opinions, but the supervisors have to make a decision, and the supervisors have to choose the regulations.
So, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Good thing. So I have another question here.
Sorry, I know you guys want to go on, this is awesome. But, I can see both sides,
Yeah.
but let's just say if this is Joan's neighbor,
Right.
and every morning I sat on my back porch and looked out for that mountain that he's referring to that blocks some of the signal. Now I'm going to look at it in another tower. That might have some bearing on my quality of life. However, you want your neighbors to be happy, you want them to stay involved in their hobbies and their interests. So you guys have a really tough job. So, but I can see both sides, and I can see where it may impact some people. I don't know if it interfere with any cell signals or TV signals or anything. I know they bounce off satellites and stuff, but I don't know if that would interfere with anything. Baby monitors, you have to kind of look at some of that stuff too. Home security devices, I just don't know enough about that. If it was in my neighborhood, I'd have to know about.
Well, I'm not an engineer, but I think the frequencies have to be separate from those different
I don't know anything about that.
to avoid conflict.
Do we have any more comments before we, yes, Bob?
Matt, I just want to thank the administration for following up on the obstructed view intersections that we talked about last month.
We're still in
We're still in hearing.
We're still in the hearing for the ordinance.
Yeah, this is,
Okay, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. You know what's going on? My body temperature is approaching its upper limit.
What other one, yes. Yeah.
My behavior is going to be stranger.
We did go from the open forum into the public hearing, so that's where we're still at this point. I just think it's still in the hands of our solicitors to go right.
well, on the specific concern I was raised, I made a recommendation.
Yes.
To the board to decide. If there is no additional public comment about the zoning ordinance draft that's under consideration tonight, I would recommend to the board that we close the public hearing.
Do I hear a motion to close?
I'll make a motion to close the hearing.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, Bruce.
Now, all of the procedures that are legally required to consider action on both of the zoning ordinances have now been satisfied, so it is permissible for the board to consider action on the ordinance.
So, first motion to enact the zoning map amendment. Do I hear a motion to enact?
I'll make a motion.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second, motion to enact the zoning ordinance amendment.
I make a motion to enact.
Okay, I'll make a motion not to enact. So we have a problem because right now Tracy has been has to abstain from the vote because of potential conflict of interest, but in the matter of the time, her vote would have to be considered.
Yes. So are you announcing your conflict of interest at this time?
I have a conflict of interest because I have a commercial building with a vacancy, and I was contacted by someone interested in potentially renting the space for
So,
As has been stated, in a situation process where action can move forward without the member who has a conflict of interest participating in the vote having stated their conflict, and you have a written form of that that can be included in the minutes of tonight's meeting. Tracy does have the right to cast a vote.
Okay, so do you still have the motion to enact? There's a motion. Do you second it?
I'll second.
Do you second? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, two.
So I just want to ask you a question.
Yes.
The whole time we've been talking about this for the past 6 months,
Yes.
you have had no problem whatsoever.
I've raised my concerns. What I'm referring to is support the tranquil and rural way of life. So I do have a problem, concern about expanding microbreweries and wineries. We have discussed that, I think, in our workshop meetings.
So you hear if you voted no then?
Okay. Next on the agenda, we have David Fisher variance application. There's a presentation.
Yes, actually, for the board's just knowledge, Mr. Fisher was not able to make it this evening. He called me on the phone. I was actually quite upset about not being able to attend tonight, just to answer your questions. Planning Commission did review the variance request. They offered a recommendation of support for that, and it's essentially for the setback from the right-of-way of the road. The greenhouse that is being located has to be 50 feet, I believe, off the right-of-way, and it's going to be 25 feet off the right-of-way. I'm sorry, it's 60 feet instead of 60 feet is the requirement, 25 is where it's going to be located. And it's actually in an area where there's already some existing impervious coverage on the property, and his hardship is essentially because of the other features on the property, not being able to move into the setback requirement. That would be your consideration for recommendations in the zoning hearing board this evening.
Any questions on that? All right, do I hear a motion to support?
I think they should say we're.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. The next item, motion to approve payment of invoices prepared by the treasurer. Do I hear a motion to approve? Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Next, motion to direct, Technicon to prepare the needed construction documents, obtain quotes, and award a contract to construct a sidewalk along Sibley Road in the right-of-way for the driveway of the Gateway Baptist Church to the James A. Humboldt Memorial Park, provided the project cost is $20,600 or less. If the project is over $20,600, then the bid the project and report to the board.
I think they should direct.
Do I hear a
I'll
second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next item. Motion to direct the manager to obtain quotes and award a contract to replace 3 heat pumps units in the administration building, provided the project cost is $20,600 or less. The project is over $20,600, then the bid the project and report to the board.
I think they should direct.
Do I hear a
I'll
second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, motion to approve, not approve, a financial maintenance security release recommended by Telecom for A. Rubens Stoltzfus, 582 Icedale Road, in the amount of $6,800.38 for a stormwater plan. And B. Maria Wright and Robert Flint of 84 Mellow Lane, in the amount of $4,100 for a stormwater plan. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Skip number 7.
I skipped number 7, the PennDOT one, yes. Okay, motion to direct the manager to submit 2 applications to PennDOT project approval to use liquid fuels funds for Morgantown Road surfacing. Estimated cost $25,000, and the Park Road surfacing estimated cost at $150,000. And if approved by PennDOT, authorize the Public Works Director to complete the project.
I'll make a motion.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
All in
Aye.
favor? Aye. All right, now we're at number 9, other new business. And that would be, do I hear a motion to adopt a resolution to support legislative efforts to amend the Pennsylvania Constitution to assign the decennial task of both legislative and congressional redistricting to an independent citizen redistricting commission, and to direct the manager to submit a copy of this resolution to the officials in the Commonwealth. Do I hear a motion to adopt that resolution? You hear a second on that motion?
Yeah, I'll second the workshop.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Do we have any other business? So I'll now open up the floor. Bob.
Okay, thank you for letting me try again. Thank you to all of you who were involved in the follow-up on the impaired sightline on two different intersections in the township. Beaver Dam, Riddell, and Cambridge Farm. It's much better, and we all thank you. And also, I want to thank Steve for forwarding me some very valuable information about hemp. And I had come today to prepare to make a fairly long speech, but the hell with it. I'll talk to Steve when he gets air conditioning fixed.
Your recommendation is much appreciated. Okay. All right. So, do I hear any further comments, or can we top that? Okay. At this time, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. We got a fast draw on that one, so second, all in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you everyone for joining and putting up with the weather conditions in this building today. Also, for upcoming meetings, we got July 11th, Trail Committee, July 22nd, the Zoning Hearing Board for David Fisher's variance application at 7:30, July 25th, Planning Commission, August 7th, Supervisors Workshop, August 8th, Comprehensive Recreation Park Open Space and Trail Study Committee, and August 14th, the Supervisors regular meeting. Okay. Thank you everyone, enjoy the summer. Yes, I'm
And we have lots of stuff.